What's good with you? Another beautiful day and a beautiful place that God created. It's called Earth, baby. You know, um, dove into the Word a little bit today. I was mainly just trying to finish Luke. Finishing Luke overall, same thing as all the Gospels. It's pretty much a retelling of each book is literally from that person's perspective, the story of Jesus, right? And we finally got to the bad part of all the books, the death of Jesus, which came with a great part, which means our salvation, right? Um, so I didn't know personally that the Feast of Unleavened Bread is the Passover, and I also got the idea of what the Passover was more. The Passover being pretty much communion, if if I'm being accurate. Please tell me if I'm not being accurate, but that's pretty much what I got from chapter 22 specifically. I forgot to mention. I'm going chapter 22 to 24, the end of Luke. Might be 25. Yeah, chapter 22 is a long one, though. So I'm just going to hit the main points. He has the Passover, Final Supper. And pretty much, he's talking. He's like, somebody's gonna betray me, blah 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 blah. Not blah 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 blah, but you know what I mean. He said, break this bread. This bread is my body, and then this blood is the blood of the covenant, right? Or the blood of my covenant specifically, right? Being Jesus, right? And then he's like, ingest it and live in me, right? Um, but who is greatest? That's where I really got to look at under the section for that. And 22 verses 27 and forward, for who is the greater one who reclines at table, or me, or the one who serves? It is not the one who reclines at the table, but I am among you as the one who serves. And pretty much it's just saying that because they were arguing about who's the greatest, right? And pretty much Jesus is saying that even if there was a greatest, it is better to serve than it is to lead, right? And I definitely gotta get better than myself. I'm trying my best to serve. I think everybody else should too. Serve your community, serve your country, serve all of it, because if you serve the world, at least from the Jesus perspective, you know, you can make it a better place and you can bring more people to Christ. So, um, and then Jesus praying on the Mount of Olives, him just sweating and crying blood because of the distress he was going through. That's always a kick in the chest. Um, and then actually getting to Pacius Pilate. I know it's Pilate. I forget his first name though. But getting to Pilate, right? Um, Pilate Pilate literally is like, why do y'all want to crucify this man? He's not guilty. And then the crowd's just like, crucify him. And they end up letting and releasing the man thrown in prison for insurrection and murder over Jesus Christ. A man that was sinless and literally didn't do anything. He was just preaching the gospel and the truth, You got you got literally God and then a man who murders. Made that make sense, right? But then, he carried the cross um, to the place where Luke calls a skull. I remember there's a different name for it. It starts with a G or something. But they end up staying there, or not staying there. I mean, he ends up passing there. Obviously, sitting next to the one man who is pretty much mocking him and saying, "You're Jesus, right? Just save us." And then the man who's like, "Remember me in heaven," right? After condemning the other man. And, Jesus is forgiving, even though that man was probably guilty of whatever crime he had to do to get crucified. Jesus was still willing to accept him. And that just goes to show how big Jesus' love is, right? But after that, Joseph wants to go get Jesus' body from Pilate. And then, ends up burying him, right? And then the Sabbath comes. Sunday, is it coming? Right? And Jesus comes back. He's like, what's good? Right? Ends up finding the disciples and then just rocks it from there. Um, and then it doesn't give a specific day or how far off, but it says, and he led them out as far as Bethany, and lifting up his hands, he blessed them. While he blessed them, he parted from them and was carried up into heaven, and they worshipped him and returned to Jerusalem with great joy, and were continually in the temple of God, the temple blessing God. And I mean, yeah, I mean, it's kind of valid actually at the beginning. I mean, them not recognizing Jesus. I don't know if this looked like Jesus specifically still, or if it's like Revelation Jesus, right? Like white hair guy, like two different people, right? You got God in human form, and then you got God, right? So I can see why they probably didn't notice him too much, but the moment they broke that bread, they broke bread. They said, "I know who you are," right? And that's all you got to do, man. Because Jesus is breaking bread with you every day, every hour, every minute, every second. He's breaking bread with you, and he's just waiting for you to just notice him, right? And if you're in the Lord, keep breaking that bread. But I call those who are still questioning their faith to just dive in. All it takes is a little bit of the word to just compel you to be better. I know it works for me. That's why I'm gonna try to start doing this in the morning because I feel the best after reading this. Um, but yeah, I pray that the rest of y'all days go well and peace.